Hi, welcome everybody. We'll just start in a minute, just while other people join. Thank you for joining us today. Just pop a comment if you want in the comments box. You can type something to say hello so that we know you're out there, which is always lovely. And then we'll do our introductions and start the session. So do say hi if you can. Welcome those who are joining. We'll start in about 30 seconds, just whilst a few people join. So do say hello in the chat if you can. Or if you're watching this back on recording, hello. And we'll start in about 20 seconds. Okay, so thank you for joining us on this afternoon, a bit of a gloomier afternoon this week than the lovely sunshine that we've been having. As I said, please say hello in the chat. You can also use the chat throughout if you've got any comments or any questions. We will have an opportunity at the end for Q&A, so you can either write your question as it comes to you or save it for at the end when we will delve a little bit deeper into the topics that we cover. So I'm Esther Chesterman. I'm the CEO of the National Extension College. And I'd like to give a really warm welcome to Caroline Osborne, who's going to be hosting the session with me. Caroline, I'm going to introduce you, Caroline. Caroline, you're an NEC lead tutor and founding trustee of the charity Art History in Schools. As an organisation, you've obviously developed quite a lot of CPD for tutors, and you've really been at the forefront of the initiation of the campaign to really keep art history and A-level art history alive in schools. So we really thank you for that. And also, Caroline, you're a fellow of the Association for Art History, so welcome.
Thank you very much indeed.
Good. So let me just check that my slides are moving on for me. This is what the session's going to be today. So we've decided to do something and our sort of response to the UK government's levelling up agenda. And we've decided to do this through the lens of a specific A-level, and that A-level is History of Art. So it's an opportunity for National Extension College to respond to this debate. And I think it will become clear as we move through the session topics, which are listed there, why we've chosen this specific A-level, and also how it can be used as a way to explore the levelling up agenda, which I'm sure you've read a lot about and heard about in the media. Firstly, a little bit about us, for those of you who don't know who we are. National Extension College, we've been operating for over 50 years, and we're a pioneer online distance learning, and we draw students from many different contexts with many different motivations for studying with us, and you can see from our mission there about widening opportunities for students. What generally attracts students to the National Extension College, we hear from our students, is our high quality material, our tutor support, tutors such as Caroline, as well as the flexibility of self-studying for an A-level, GCSE or another type of qualification. So that's a little bit about who we are, if you didn't know. So diving straight into our topic. So the UK government has recently launched their levelling up agenda. So we really wanted to pause. Carol and I had a discussion about it, and we wanted to explore what the agenda means for our students and for the National Extension College. The government's even created a new department, the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, which Michael Gove MP is leading. And he's leading on the implementation of the white paper. Now, I don't know whether you've read the white paper, all 432 pages. Have you, Caroline?
No, a summary thereof and key highlights.
Yeah. I've boiled it down to the top line here. So the government's produced this very hefty document explaining what levelling up means. It's a phrase now that's really been bandied around quite a lot. And it contains some detail in the paper on the activity that will take place. So as I said, you've probably seen across a lot of media a number of responses to the Levelling Up announcement. This slide is from their document. There's a little picture of the document there, and if you just Google Levelling Up, you'll be able to find the white paper. And there's a whole website now that the government has put forward, which has a number of different resources that you can look at. So it's boosting productivity, spreading opportunities, restoring a sense of community and pride, and empowering local leaders in their area and the agency that those local areas have towards their own future. I've got a video now, which is Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, explaining his vision. It's very short, but his vision around what the Levelling Up agenda means. But it's also interspersed with some unbiased narrative from the Institute for Government, and that is a leading think tank, hopefully making the government more effective, and they are independent. So though you'll hear Boris speaking at the beginning, you'll hear a little bit around what the Institute for Government's analysis of the Levelling Up white paper is.
Levelling up can only be achieved with a strong and dynamic wealth-creating economy.
Levelling Up is the government's flagship policy. The Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government has been renamed the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities. And Michael Gove has been handed the task of delivering the Levelling Up agenda. But what is it? A new IFG report argues that it's not entirely clear. Sometimes the government talks about helping the most deprived people wherever they live. For example, the £2.5 billion National Skills Fund will help more adults access training whether they live in Hartlepool or Tower Hamlets. But other policies are targeted at places rather than people. The £4.8 billion Levelling Up Fund prioritises places according to a number of factors, including their economic output. That means areas that are high output but have high levels of income deprivation, such as Hounslow, are ranked lower than areas like Richmondshire that might be low output but have lower levels of income deprivation. Nor is it clear what role cities like Leeds, Liverpool and Sheffield will play in the Levelling Up agenda. The Prime Minister has talked about wanting to stop a brain drain into cities from smaller towns, but has also said he wants to close the gap in productivity between London and other cities. Creating jobs in small towns is very different to improving transport links to bigger cities. And there's also confusion about the rhetoric underpinning Levelling Up. The government talks about decentralising power, but a large number of Levelling Up policies require local areas bidding for money, which means central government still controls where money is going. Clear objectives and definition are needed to make Levelling Up a success. And without them, it will be impossible to know if the government is making progress on this ambitious agenda. Our new paper sets out 5 questions about what the government means by the phrase. Michael Gove now needs to answer them.
Levelling up can only be
Whoops, we'll move on from that. So a useful summary, I think you'll find, and you will, if you registered for this event on Eventbrite, you'd be able to get the slides, so we'll send them out to you, and then you can watch back the video or look at the Institute for Government itself if it's not a body that you are aware of. Just going to pick up on some of those themes now. One is from an organisation called Centres for Cities. As I said, many organisations have responded to the paper. The Centre for Cities, it's in advance of the white paper being launched, set out 5 questions that they wanted to see whether the government would address within the paper. Those 5 questions are there. So the first one, is there a clear mission statement? The Centre for Cities say yes, their analysis is yes, there is a clear mission statement, but that within the 432-page document, it's quite hard to find it. And that is a challenge for people to actually see what that mission statement is. The second question Centre for Cities put forward, is it strategic? Again, their analysis is yes. One of the examples they give is in saying that every region should have a globally competitive city. The government is saying it will make choices and trade-offs, which in itself is strategic. But I think you can see from the Institute for Government's analysis that there's still a lot of detail that's needed around how that strategy will be implemented. The third question the Centre for Cities wanted to explore within the white paper is there a long-term plan? And their analysis says no. One of the key elements they quote here is that the divides in the UK are hundreds of years in the making, and that the paper only looks 8 years ahead, only looks at 2030, and therefore that is not deemed in their eyes as a long-term plan to really elicit real change. Crucially, the money, is it backed with funding? And are there mechanisms in place for the spending of that funding? I think, again, the Institute for Government alluded to that around the decentralisation of funding, the bidding of funding that will be required. The analysis from the Centre for Cities is no. The lack of a long-term plan is also backed with a lack of long-term funding. And the Centre for Cities believe this signals that the Treasury is not behind the agenda, and that's a really crucial point. Number 5, are there clear metrics for measuring success? And that's really about accountability. There's 430 pages. There's a government department. How will we be able to hold them to account? And how will we be able to see whether this initiative has been successful? There are clear metrics the Centre for Cities puts forward. There are some specifics, such as commitment to get 90% of children up to the required standard of reading, writing and maths. But the author of the document thought that most metrics were blunted by poor definition. So it'd be quite hard for us to analyse and keep to account the government department. So that's some analysis from the Centre for Cities. One aspect of, and apologies for the really small font here, but you will get the slides and you'll be able to obviously look at this document that I've shared as well. One aspect of the debate is around lifelong learning and learning as a leveller. And this organisation, Respublica, has put forward a document which picks up on some of the themes that come through in the Levelling Up campaign, and really is a proposal to the government around how education can be used for levelling up. So one of the areas that they put forward, I'm going to pull out some of those small little areas of those small bullet points to help you understand a little bit. One bullet point is to introduce a statutory right to retrain, regardless of prior attainment, to support even more working adults in deprived areas to progress along the skills escalator. And there's a lot of policy announcements coming through from the government regarding lifelong learning and a lifelong learning commitment. So that's really a space to watch. One other bullet point I wanted to highlight was to enshrine a clearly defined role for local and combined authorities. And I think you'll see that's a theme that has come through from the Institute for Government and the Centre for Cities around what is the role, what is the devolved role that those who are in the communities and living and working in the communities and represent those communities can play. And another bullet point I wanted to highlight is to extend the scope of the education investment areas to look at wider outcomes for lifelong learning. That's from levels 4 to 6. At the moment, the government last year put forward funding for level 3 and put forward a list of qualifications that level 3 funding would be available for. Respublica is looking for the government to broaden and widen that from level 3 up to level 6. As I said, there's going to be a number of policy announcements coming out from the government around this area. So do look out for them, or you can sign up for our monthly e-shot, which we just sort of summarise a few of the policy decisions that are coming out from government. So we'll put that on the slides as well, so that you can sign up for that if you're interested. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of the context. I'm now going to hand over to Caroline, and we're sort of funneling down. We've looked at the Levelling Up agenda in a broad sense. We've funneled down to a few elements around lifelong learning. And Caroline's going to funnel down even more and really look at it through the lens of history of art and A-level history of art, and really explore what that can be around a skills development in a Levelling Up agenda.
Thank you very much, Esther. Good afternoon. I've taught A-level art history in schools and colleges for nearly 40 years. And I quite frankly believe that access to one's multiple cultural heritages is a fundamental right for everyone, which means every student in every school. And I really think this is just a simple issue of social justice. Now, sorry, my PowerPoint does not seem to be going forward.
If you go right at the bottom, there's some little arrows that highlight when you on your PowerPoint.
So is this on the screen now? I don't seem to have. Where should I be looking?
On your PowerPoint itself, down in the bottom left-hand side, you have to hover over it, and then it should come up with some arrows for you.
I think, should I? Sorry, Esther, I'm very sorry to do this in the middle of a webinar.
That's fine.
I'm on the main StreamYard at the moment. Do I need to go into my separate?
You do, where your PowerPoint is, yes.
Sorry, I thought that's what had been moved into a central one. Brilliant. Okay, let's see if it's working now. Great.
Perfect. Well done.
Apologies for that.
I think everybody learned something from that as
Human
well.
rights. Sorry about that. It's a different system from college. Okay. I think in the UK there are many myths around exactly what art historians do and the value of art history. And I basically hope to debunk these myths and outline the core values of a cultural education. And I want to introduce you to some features of particularly the NEC online syllabus, which make it accessible, relevant to students, and especially those in the north of England. Firstly, key question, what transferable skills can students develop? And why are these more important than ever in today's rapidly changing world? The visual is now the dominant medium in the world, yet visual literacy is not part of a national curriculum. Indeed, when it is most needed, art education is being marginalised within our schools. Few students suspect the complexity with which images manipulate the eye and the mind, and yet art history develops these core skills of visual literacy to help students learn not just how to look, but really how to see. Such skills should be central to our educational programme, not seen as rarefied and elitist, an optional extra. Art history also enables students to think critically and analytically, to recognise fake news, to use their imaginations, to communicate effectively in a media-saturated world. It opens horizons so that young people can become fully creative individuals. To study the history of art is to study the history of human creativity, to learn to look and see and understand our full potential. It offers a wide breadth of social experience and a sense of community. Regardless of background, we are all embedded in culture and have the possibility of cultural enrichment through engaging with our cultural heritages, from the local to the global. And just because the arts bring enormous pleasure, that does not mean they are merely recreational. Secondly, what does studying art history involve? Art history asks key questions. Why does a work of visual art look the way that it does? Because of where, when, how, why, and by whom it was made. Why was it important in the past? And what is its significance today? This challenge sets students on a journey, expanding their skills, exploring culture, learning core concepts and key vocabulary. It allows students to ask challenging questions and to develop theories to help them make sense of art around the world. Now, this slide shows one of the theme in the art history A-level that one studies in the first year on identities. And I thought the best way to explain actually what art historians do is to give you a little taster. So I'm going to do that, and particularly in relationship to artists from the north of England. Now, if this was an in-person event, it would be more fun. And also, we could do a show of hands to find out which names featured in a top 10 of established British artists. And the chances are these would include maybe Damien Hirst, David Hockney. It's Hockney's work that is annotated here with a red arrow, and sculptors Henry Moore and maybe Barbara Hepworth, amongst others, all from Yorkshire. And the latter three all feature as major works and artists within our syllabus. If we delved deeper, few would be able to explain why, as of now, the not so young British artist from the 1990s, Hirst, might be associated with shock and money. Hockney, depending on your age, with pop art and or iPad landscapes, whilst Moore and Hepworth are abstracted figuration in response to a landscape, were at the very centre of British modernist art. All four in their time totally transformed the way we look, think about and understand art globally. And all four did this through a thorough understanding of knowledge of art history. Yorkshire Sculpture Park is popular with thousands of tourists from all over the world. Yet young people in schools and colleges in the north today, despite the internet, do not have the opportunities those artists all had to access their own multiple histories. So I'm going to focus on one image here. Now, the key is always to ask the right questions. So let's think, how much can you understand just from looking? How much visual detective work can you do? How much research is needed to really dig deeper to find out its real significance? I think from everyday experience, you might interpret the body language and the gestures of the figures. Maybe to mean they're at home. He has no shoes on, his toes are in the carpet. And the standing woman with her hand on her hip to be dominant in the relationship. A study of the formal qualities, and this is what we mean by visual analysis, using the skills of visual analysis as outlined in our NEC course textbook, available as an ebook, but we highly recommend you actually reading the actual book. Thinking about art confirms this. This just outlines the kind of things one should think about when looking at an image. Mrs. Clark, who is actually textile designer Celia Birtwell, is highlighted. The stronger, deeper colours of her clothes stand out, and the side of the table in the foreground uses linear perspective to create a convincing space and takes her eye through the image towards the window, while the space of the window in the centre of the composition separates the couple. However, if you know about the history of double portraits, you realise that Hockney has actually deliberately reversed the poses to comment on changes in society. If we look back at this 18th century image by another famous British artist, Gainsborough, Mr. and Mrs. Andrews, Mr. Andrews with a swaggering, confident landowner surveying the land, while his petite wife sits in her pretty rococo dress with her legs and ankles together. Or Matisse's painting of himself resembling a rigid classical column looking down on his seated wife, again separated by a window, with her squashed into the corner. Again, if you know about symbolism, then the unplugged cordless telephone, just going to go back to that, then the unplugged cordless telephone, remember some school students might not realise that it's unplugged or needed to be, is not merely a functional item, but a sign of their lack of communication, and that the lilies in the vase usually relate to virginity. Further research would reveal Hockney deliberately referencing a much earlier painting, this 15th century portrait of the Arnolfinis, and with a certain amount of humour. The woman in the green gown seems to be pregnant, but if you look carefully, and remember it's all about the looking, it's only yards and yards of bunched up green fabric. While Celia Birtwell, Mrs. Clark, in the Hockney painting is in fact pregnant. Hockney's acrylic painting is less interested in naturalistic rendering of textures and details and light than Van Eyck's illusionistic oil painting is, but both artists, very different times and places, are investigating gender relations within their specific cultural contexts. So to fully understand the depiction of identities and meaning, historical research is required on the artists, the sitters, their relationships, cultural concerns of the time. Hockney and the Clarks were 1970s celebrities, like Posh and Becks in the noughties. Not to give the game away, but this was painted only 3 years after the legalisation of homosexuality in 1967. Hockney's gay, Ossie Clark's bisexual, and the cat, Percy, of the title, Mr. and Mrs. Clark and Percy, sitting upright on Clark's lap and looking outside the window, was actually their other white cat, Blanche. But Percy is in fact Cockney slang for penis. So unsurprisingly, the marriage actually broke up a few years later. So through research and reading, you can dig deep, move from description to analysis, to put forward a convincing argument on the nature of identity. And there are no right or wrong answers. There are interpretations, and you need to give evidence for those interpretations. And just before we move on, just a little reminder that, of course, we were looking at these works in reproductions, and this is their actual comparative scale. Now, I hope you're amazingly impressed by Van Eyck's detail. Okay, most people, most children experience a lot of some 2D creative art in schools, but few feel quite so confident dealing with sculpture. And the NEC syllabus helps students move from a position of personal response to description and then to analysis. particularly in the work of Henry Moore here, which is a key work for the visual analysis of sculpture section. The course uses the really excellent US website called smarthistory.org, which has written resources that are actually specifically designed for the British A-level art history. And guidance here is given using Moore's reclining figure as a key work, a work which is the result of looking at non-European traditions. Back to the theme paper of Art and Nature, Barbara Hepworth, her works, and red arrow here. Barbara Hepworth is a specified artist, which means you will study her in greater detail, and 2 key works by her. One key work is all 9 figures of the family man, and this is in Yorkshire Sculpture Park is the only place that all 9 are exhibited. Many viewers are wary of abstraction, even though it's been central to fine art for over a century. But the more you look at these abstracted figures, the more you begin to read them, in fact, as a traditional heterosexual family. The fine arts also include architecture. And to be frank, I think some art teachers and students initially believe this might be the most boring and technical section. But they quickly realized that architecture offers them a whole new language. Literally, initially, the classical language of architecture, and later Romanesque and Gothic. Here's just an image of Durham Cathedral, which also features in the course and is really interesting because it actually moves from the Romanesque towards the Gothic in the course of the building of the cathedral. And you can see all the annotations. That's just a little taste of all that interesting new vocabulary. You also learn about Modernist vocabulary. So once grasped, this new language is immensely satisfying. It means that young people can walk around their local town, feel they have a stake in it, feel they have a connection, looking up at the facades, recognizing styles. It's great to show off to your friends and family all this new language. It means developing a sense of civic pride in local history. It means understanding what prompted the designs of their own homes, choice of materials and structures. And they soon realize that architecture is primarily about ideas, and in most cases, actually about power and politics. The Pearson EdXL Global Syllabus that the NEC course is based on takes key preoccupations of our contemporary world and things that particularly young people are concerned about: climate change and the environment, and the exploration of humanity's response to these in the art and nature theme. And as we've seen in the art and identities theme, students can draw upon their own personal experience, emotional intelligence, and sensibility when addressing key issues to really explore complex, often contested identities and helping personal development at a really crucial time in young people's lives. This decolonized syllabus might appear to merely add specific new works from across the globe to an existing canon and embedded methodological structures. But in fact, by teaching these new works fundamentally changes the way that students look at traditional or conventional works. Studying the Suleymaniye Mosque, for example, the design causes one not just to reassess church design or act as a prompt to visit one's local mosque, but to understand the role of architecture in expanding the Ottoman Empire in particular and imperialist maneuvers more widely. Finding out the original location of the Benin plaques on the right-hand side here, now in various British museums. There's a British Museum in London, some in Liverpool, and private collections, transforms them from aesthetic objects of great skill to specific artifacts loaded with geographical, mythical, religious, and economic information, integral to an understanding of Edo culture of the past and British colonialism and slave trade during Queen Victoria's rule. For students from African Caribbean diaspora and those with Islamic heritage, formal study of these works acknowledges their value to world culture and gives them a voice and a sense of identity worth sharing. I'm just very briefly going to tell you about the second year. The second year of the syllabus allows for a much greater understanding of cultural specificity because it focuses on 2 particular periods: Rebellion and Revival, French and British art from 1848 to 99, and Brave New World, French and European art from 1900 to 1939. Hence, studying the culmination of all the traditional arts leading from the Renaissance right the way through to the mid-19th century, and then the modernist break that totally transformed visual language and has resulted in the sort of multiplicity of art we see today. Now, the United Kingdom is absolutely renowned as one of the greatest creative nations and respected and admired as such by the world. Yet, due to successive cultural policies and funding cuts, we've created a kind of two-tier system here, literally a kind of cultural apartheid, in which cultural and art subjects are only taught to a handful of young students in traditional bastions of private education, hence creating and maintaining a cultural elite. If you look at these shocking statistics, on the left, this is by Ben Franklin from the Centre for Progressive Policy, and you can see, if you've got incredibly good eyesight, that on the far left is Yorkshire and the north, and on the far right is London, and that sort of grid goes up as you move south through the country. You have a greater opportunity for educational attainment. Whilst the NEC are very proud that in the first year, you will notice London dominated from the people signing up, but that actually Yorkshire and Lancashire, that I've highlighted here with red arrows, are the second largest enrolment areas, which is very encouraging. And also just to flag up how well our students did in the last set of results, because I think the course is very exciting and interactive, and they all found a way to engage. There are lots of responses to the Levelling Up agenda by important arts bodies. So I just put this up really as a reference so that you could, if you wanted to look up further, you could pursue some of this. So things like engagement in local culture and community, personal health and well-being, skills, and sort of re-evaluating the purpose of local communities. Now, the keys in cultural capital. This means different things to different people. But art history can fill many educational gaps that are the result of background and lack of opportunities. As students become familiar with the art of individuals, movements, society as a whole new world opens up to them. Their general knowledge will expand to include Bible stories, classical mythology, political ideologies, historical developments, and a whole host of other facts and figures, but not just in isolation. It's not just learning, this is understanding in a meaningful context. Art history students will develop ideas and explore and explore and expand beyond their present horizons to understand what has influenced their surroundings and how to interpret them. They can then become not just experts in their chosen fields, but interdisciplinary polymaths who will always be open to new challenges and who will always be willing to work outside their comfort zones to become fully creative individuals. They will have gained what sociologists call cultural capital, neatly summarised in this slide produced by NCAD. So thank you for that. Even with effective communication skills, to work in the creative, cultural, heritage and tourist industries, and which provide a large percentage of jobs, but to work in those without cultural capital would be daunting, if not absolutely terrifying. So NEC has tried to open up the course to give a possibility of getting art history A-level a reality for students from communities that are traditionally underrepresented in the field, and especially those from the north. So the online A-level not only impacts individual state school students who are being offered the same opportunity to study art history as their peers at independent schools, but it also has the potential to make the world of art history in universities, museums and galleries more diverse and inclusive, as the online A-level extends the reach of art history. So in the first year, we've seen sixth form students, foundation art students, art teachers, and even museum educators taking the course to fill the gaps in their own education and training. So here, I'd just like to leave you with a quotation here from my student Rosa, who was encouraged to take science A-levels at school and then did English as well, but realised that actually her real love was the humanities. And so while she took a year out to do a foundation art course, she took the art history A-level and is now studying a degree in English and art history at Bristol University. Just give you a little second to read what she has to say about the course.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Really, really excited. I went to the Hockney exhibition in Cambridge at the weekend, but obviously being in Cambridge in the south, I have access to things like that. And thank you for really drawing on the campaign, I'd say, that NEC has, which is to really broaden and widen the access of availability of subjects such as the history of art, not just to the South and to a group of schools, but to anybody who has an interest in taking it. And I really liked your aspect, drawing on the skills that are developed, and your cry around visual literacy being lost if subjects like this aren't explored. I think I'll move on to my slides in a minute, but it'd be quite good just to take these two questions, if that's okay, Caroline, because they relate very much to the presentation you've just delivered. The first one, thank you, Trevor. He was just asking around the difference between UK and international approaches to art and design history. Is that something you could comment on, Caroline?
Yes, I think that's what's so interesting, is that we're renowned for our, world. People come here to see the British Museum, to see all our amazing paintings, to see Constable Country, and yet English students in schools in the UK learn nothing about this at all, unless they're particularly lucky with an individual teacher. Whereas, for example, Italy, can you imagine every single Italian student knows everything about Michelangelo and Leonardo, and are very, very proud of them. And if you dare critique them, woe betide, because they will take you to cut. They feel really proud. And the same for a lot of European, Poland the same. And I think that's because in the International Baccalaureate, there is a section that is about theories of knowledge. And in Europe, art history has been associated with sort of philosophy and ideas and theories about the aesthetic. And theory of knowledge is a core part of every single school student's experience. So they will always look at aesthetics and think of different ways of learning and understanding and making sense of the world. So in that case, we don't shine very well in relationship to the European model.
No,
and in the US, as part of your applications for college, there's the AP program, and that has a real whiz through hundreds of years of art history. But again, that's part of a college application if you want to do liberal arts or humanities.
Thank you, Caroline. I can hear another cry there for you, to whoever is listening out there around the embedding of this sort of cultural capital within our curriculum. And I think you sort of referenced that it's been gradually chipped away over the years.
When I've been teaching a long time, but in the 80s, literally, I taught art history to hairdressing students, furniture restoration students, YTS students. It was part of anybody who was working in any of the arts would get, the basics, approaches to art history.
Yeah, well, we're doing our bit with having it available as a distance learning subject. Charlotte's question, and I'll move on to my slides, really relevant and up to date. Again, it comes back to your sort of statements around knowledge of visual imagery and how to analyse and explore visual imagery. And just looking at, obviously, as you said at the beginning, there's so much that students, sort of access now. From an image perspective, what are the skills within the A-level art history of art that help with this?
Yes, I think this is what I was saying about tuning your eye, not just to look, but to actually see what you're looking at. I think because you have to do quite a lot of intense looking in terms of, composition, space, colour, form, and everything else, you become very tuned in to ways in which figures are represented, or where light meets shade and all sorts of things like that. So there have been some quite interesting fake videos on Twitter, not on Instagram, but I know on Twitter, where they've superimposed the head of, Zelensky onto various other figures. And in fact, if you have a good knowledge of anatomy and life drawing and all the rest of it, you can still see they don't match up very well. But I think also just being conscious that art is not, I think some people think that art is a mirror of reality, a mirror of nature, but art is a right representation. It's about artists making decisions in order to put across a point of view, just like propaganda. So it really helps you tune in to how people, especially leaders in the front, have always recognised the value of art in terms of propaganda. So for us to underestimate that would be very risky indeed, I feel.
Yeah, that's a very good point around the choice. There's a decision being made behind this image that you're looking at, whether that be an image of a piece of art or an image that somebody's put together from different photographs. So
the framing, the cropping, everything, the lighting, it tells a story. You can make if you want to make a film that is very critical of public housing and council housing, go on a wet day, see the stains on the concrete, and you're going to send one message. Go on a sunny day with the fantastic texture of the concrete and the blue sky and the sharp edges, and everybody's going to want to live there. So this is the way it works, and I think art history really helps you think quite carefully about that and become wonderful.
Thank you. I think we'll move on, as other people might think of other questions, or those who've already asked a question. Please do feel free to ask any more. I'm just going to Caroline very helpfully embedded a lot of the presentation that you delivered, Caroline, in the NEC A-level history of art. So I'm just going to do a little whiz through, and there's a short video that just gives a little bit more of an understanding of how our mode of delivery is, because for some people there's perhaps a confusion or a lack of understanding of what online distance learning is, and also an understanding of how history of art can be studied at a distance. It's a very visual medium, as you said, Caroline, and has a lot of key concepts within it. But I think our results show that we're very successful in being able to deliver a high quality course that sort of delves into a visual and highly sort of sophisticated concepts that these curriculum has. So I've just put a couple of quotations here, and it's also linking how self-study distance learning can meet perhaps some of the outcomes and aims of the Levelling Up agenda. On the left, we have a comment from Michael Young, one of the founders of the National Extension College and a real pioneer and innovator around access to education. One of the key things that Michael Young was looking for was time flexible, a phrase that means different things to different people. But it's really a way of delivering education that isn't fixed to a time and a place, because we are living our lives in different ways. We have different needs, different motivations, and different pulls on our time. So an organisation such as National Extension College allows you to explore either things that you're interested in from a sort of a natural interest perspective, or something that you want to move forward to within a new career, such as the case study that you referenced there, Caroline. And then a statement from Stephanie Reeves, who does look at policy and looking at how Levelling Up and the lifelong learning agenda can really help move people forward up the socio-economic ladder and really allowing those who perhaps are needing to earn or needing to care to enable them to actually explore education as well. So just two quotations to link it back to the Levelling Up agenda there. So we're rightly very proud of our course design. And Caroline again talked about that as you were presenting. Our approach to the development of courses starts with quality material and real academic integrity. We use subject experts such as Caroline, subject partners such as Art History in School, and we have a number of partners who really help ensure that we are diluting the course to a point where somebody can access it, but scaffolding their learning, their knowledge and their understanding to a point where they can also access the assessment, build those competencies, build their knowledge, and really explore deep learning regarding the particular specification. I've got next a short video, which just is a run through of our learning management system, which just explores how we deliver A-level history of art in an online distance learning mode.
Welcome to this walkthrough of NEC's online A-level history of art course, developed in partnership with the Association for Art History. When you open your course in Learn at NEC, you will see the course companion, a list of forums, plans, guides and support that are designed to help you with your studies. This page also contains links to all of the sections of the course with summaries of what you will focus on in each section. Click Section 1, Visual Analysis, Painting. This landing page will list the section topics with a progress bar for each. Let's go to Topic 2, Genre and Subjects. You can scroll with your mouse or navigate using these handy markers in the sidebar. Each topic includes an introduction and learning objectives. This course provides you with all the information you will need to prepare for an A-level History of Art exam, including engaging images and prompts to make you slow down and take in important points. Click on Study Hints to read additional notes that will help you progress through the course in the most efficient way. Throughout your course, you can input text and save to receive feedback and discussion points. The answers you submit are later available in a printable PDF. There are videos throughout the course where you can learn more about the topics from subject experts. There are short quizzes and drag and drop activities to help you test your own understanding of the material. You can check your answers, reset for another try, or reveal the solution. Image galleries throughout the course give you an opportunity to compare images around a theme. Simply use the arrows to navigate. The summary at the end of each topic provides you with a checklist of what you have learned so you can see your progress throughout your studies. Not sure on an item? You can always revisit the topic. Assignments are made available in each section on the main course page. The assignment is provided as a downloadable and printable PDF. Completing these assignments throughout your course gives you the best chance of success. For assignment feedback, tutors can point you in the right direction and help you make improvements to your work.
Okay, hopefully that gave you a little feel of, if you decided to take an A-level History of Art, how you would be studying. We really want to ensure that our campaign to broaden and widen access to this qualification is really successful. We've had some great feedback from those who have taken part in the course, and really good amount of students coming on board for many different reasons. Caroline, you talked a little bit there about the different motivations for students to take a A-level in History of Art. We want to broaden it more than just if you're looking to move career and looking to move into the art. We really would like to see it as an established A-level, as one of the choices that you might make to develop skills, to develop understanding of how to analyse, understanding how to think deeply, and understanding how to present your thoughts and ideas in a way that others can engage with. All skills that are needed across a number of different roles, sectors, and jobs. Here's just a few case studies of some of our successful students. And as Caroline said, we were really pleased with our results over the last 2 years with our A-level History of Art. And we're looking at this, as I said, through the lens of levelling up. We don't want A-level History of Art and the element of cultural capital to be only available to a few. If we really do want to see the agenda of a complete equal access to culture, for communities across the whole of England, we need to ensure subjects such as A-level History of Art are equally available to different parts of the UK. So we'll open up for any other questions or discussion. We've had a few more questions come in, or comments, which is really nice. We've got a comment here. I love your title, Novels and Knitting. That's a very nice, I presume it's not your name, but I think you're indicating your interest, which is lovely. The question you put, are there any accessible books you would recommend for those interested in the subject? Oh, and there you go.
This is the gift. You know, this is the book you can't do without. This is such a good read, honestly, at any level. Fantastic. But I think the good thing is in the A-level, there's a section as you go through the courses. There's I think it's called Going Further, And that basically links to lots of things, like it might be full-length feature films, might be novels, might be extension reading. I'm as long as you realise that a novel is a work of fiction and separate from archival documents, I think it's a fantastic way to get involved in different artists and different movements. And the thing you need different sources, and you need to be able to argue with different sources. So within the course, there are excerpts. There's a lot of excerpts from different kinds of books written by art historians, written by art critics, written by journalists, written by artists, so that you get different perspectives on that. Unfortunately, in terms of course key works that have been chosen for the A-level, I mean, obviously copyright is an issue with contemporary work. There's not very much textile art involved. Just to be frank about this, I think. Sorry about that.
That's fine. Thank you, Caroline. One of the elements with the NEC self-study material is that it is developed by us. It's unique. So it's owned by us. And it does capture, obviously fully what you need to learn, and really sort of enhances your understanding of the specification and leads you through the subject. But we do reference, as you say, to other material, other things, and we ensure we use references of material that is as easily accessible as possible, so that wherever you are, you can study and use the additional material. Just wanted to pick up, while others, thank you, novels and knitting, just wanted to pick up on a couple of other themes here. You talked a little bit, Caroline, about the two-tier system, and this I know at the beginning when we were looking at developing the A-level history of art. We've also developed an A-level in classical civilizations, so we're really wanting to ensure an astronomy and subjects that potentially, and we don't want to sort of put ourselves in competition with any of the public sector for education, but tend to be a little bit more taught in those areas. And where we've seen is obviously the state education system, particularly in the north, are not accessing these types of qualifications. Do you have a sort of understanding of why that may be? What has happened over the years for that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's successive government policies, unfortunately. I mean, I think initially, I mean, people will think I'm crazy if I talk about this, but if you imagine a world before the internet, you had to have a projector and you had to make slides, and that was actually an extremely expensive and time-consuming business. So literally, in terms of funding, that made that made a difference, and it also meant that you had to have somebody who really kind of knew how to go about making the slides. So it was but once the internet was there, then actually images were open to everybody, and that kind of barrier broke down. When AS levels were introduced, so that there were good numbers of students in the course has been going since the early 60s actually, but in the 70s and 80s, if I remember it, there were good numbers. There were a lot of sixth form colleges would teach it as well as a lot of private schools, and there were a lot of different syllabuses, so you had a really wide range of choice that you could match up with your own students and your own student interests and your own interests. That went down to just a single examination board in 2000. So that was a disadvantage at one level, but at the same time, S levels were introduced, and that was fantastic because people took 4 AS levels. So people would take a punt on the 4th subject, oh, I'll try art history. I'm only going to do it for a year and then I'm going to drop it. And in fact, of course, they didn't just do it for a year. They absolutely loved it and they followed it through. So that was another, a bit of a boost for art history in that sense. And then, AS levels end, and so it is a bit of a roller coaster there, going up and down. And I also just think that people have, if you just watched sort of BBC art programs, you would think you had to be a certain kind of person with a certain kind of background to get involved. And I think the thing that I really wanted to push today, and the NEC is so good at, is that what it gives you skills. So like, it doesn't matter what you look at. You don't have to go to an expensive show at a London gallery. You can go to your local museum. You can go to your neighborhood church. You can look at your own house. And what it does, it gives you questions to ask and things to look at to make you, and so you can take those questions, you can take those core concepts, and wherever you go, you can kind of make sense of what you're looking at, because you know what questions to ask, and work out why something looks the way that it does. And that's a massively kind of empowering thing, not just for A-level, not just for university, but for life. I mean, just to give an example, fourth year medical students at Harvard, Rutgers, MIT and Imperial College in London, they all do art history modules because it really refines their visual analysis. And what you need for diagnosis is to notice little details that other people are not noticing.
Fascinating.
It's really important. And also in US colleges, they've done a lot of research. So again, if you did a humanities degree in US colleges, you would all do an art history module. And at the time, lots of young people were a bit grumpy about it. But on the feedback over the years, they all say by the age of 40, when Harvard's getting its feedback, everybody says that in terms of the quality of their life, art history is the thing that has added most to the actual quality of their life in terms of understanding the world they live in.
Thank you for that.
Really a broad education.
Yeah, and thank you for that, a really sort of succinct summary of the history of where art history has been. And I think very important point there about students needing to see themselves studying something. They need to see people like them.
Yeah,
and that's very important. We try very hard with our case studies and the imagery we put forward of what who the history of art is for. It's for everybody and anybody. But I think you're right. Sometimes people see it; they have a perception of it as being for a certain type of person. So thank you for that. Novels and knitting, another great question. So we'll put that one up. Thank you. So alluding here to the changes that have had to happen with the delivery of education since obviously COVID and lockdown and limitation of schools, and something to think about moving forward with funding, obviously, and schools perhaps being more fearful of taking children on trips and young people on school trips, not only because of COVID, but also because inflation is rising. People have less money to spend on that. Just from a sort of technical perspective, obviously for this year, the exam boards have recognised the changes to some context for students over the last 2 years, and there have been some adaptations put in around GCSE and A levels. But I think your question was perhaps more broad, novels and knitting, around access to museums, access to art. How does that affect somebody's ability to achieve? I'll start first, where I think that we do have students who are very limited in their access, and that could be physical, or it could be just from where they're living or their context. The way that we've developed the course is making it more accessible for somebody who might, for some physical or geographical reason, not be able to access the broad canon of art that we discuss within the course. However, we of course want to encourage people to go out into the world and look at the world and look at art, go to and visit museums. But my take on it, that I would not see it as affecting somebody's ability to meet the GCSE and A-level requirement if for whatever reason, whether that be physical or geographical, they can't do that. But we would like to encourage it. Caroline, any sort of comment on that?
Yes, well, in relation to the actual report, it's hardly surprising that they don't affect GCSE results, because I think visits to museums and galleries are not directly linked necessarily to the topic and the question on your GCSE paper. And in fact, to get a GCSE, you just need to, learn what you need to learn for the exam. And unfortunately, and that has been a big problem, because students now arrive in the sixth form to do A-levels, and they haven't really done any exploratory learning or expansion. They have, the syllabus has been delivered to them, they've learnt it, they've learned how to answer a question, and they've got a good grade in their GCSE. That in no way prepares you for life education or sort of thinking more widely. So no, having no correlation between GCSE results and going to a museum is not really surprising. But of course, going to a museum, what it does do is it gets you to think more widely and actually to ask those questions, because I think it's always about asking the questions as much as the answers. And of course, it actually prepares you much better for making later choices about your education and what you find interesting. And it also, once you've been taken to a museum, by your school, your primary school, whatever it might be, your mum, you know, your grandmum, whatever it might be, you then feel it's a place you can go. You feel it's accessible. I mean, you know, we own these museums, you know, they're paid out of our taxes. We all have access to them. And I think huge numbers of children and adults would never conceive like walking up the steps of the National Gallery and thinking, I can just walk in there and have a look and sit on the bench and take my time, because it seems like a very alien, threatening, you know, it exudes a certain kind of aura which says not open to me. And actually that's why visits are so important for young people, because then they think, oh no, it's okay, I can go in here, you know, and wow, I didn't know I was going to see this, and it just starts, it's a stimulus. So no, I don't think necessarily going to the Science Museum is going to give you a better grade in your chemistry GCSE, but it might actually spur you on to end up being a scientist, which is the bigger picture.
Thank you. I think that sort of brings up the debate about what the purpose of education and the wide sort of element of education regarding not only the aspect of passing an assessment, but what it's doing to enrich your life and for you to actually move forward with questions, with comment, and you know, interests that are beyond the narrow linear GCSEs or A levels that you're studying. So I'm sure that's another webinar, I think, Caroline. So we're just over time. Thank you again for a really insightful presentation, Caroline. And hopefully for the audience, it's given you a little bit of a taste of what levelling up is, what it means, and what we feel at National Extension College, our place is in ensuring students across the country have access to subjects such as A-level history of art, which we feel very passionate about. And hopefully that came across, I'm sure it did, within our presentation. And hopefully you've got a little bit of an understanding, if you didn't already, of what self-study online distance learning looks like and how successful it can be in ensuring students can access high quality delivery of A-levels and really succeed in them. So thank you all. Thank you for watching, listening.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Caroline. And I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you.
Thank you.